So anyway, I've noticed, because it's Easter and bank holiday and all that, I've seen a lot of kids at the con today at HorrorFied, and I just want to pimp one of my projects, which is really perfect for the children in the audience. I have a show on Apple TV Plus now called Curses, with a really great theme about how we should all return the artifacts that we've taken from other cultures and put them in our museums and stuff. But it's a great show for the young people. So and Dragon's Blood is also out there in the animation universe somewhere, so you guys can catch those. Okay, enough about me. Let's get right into the Q&A. Anybody that's got a question, but you guys got to shout it out, because I don't see anybody out there with a mic. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. Right, the gentleman over here with the glasses. He wants to know what it was like to work with Wes Craven. Okay, here's my Wes Craven story. I did a television series with Wes prior to doing Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Part 7. And we were up in Vancouver, Canada, where they film everything these days. I mean, you get in the elevator in the morning with Patrick Stewart and Alan Cummings, and you know, it's amazing. But I had my own apartment because I was doing a series, and I was right on Stanley Park. My dog became a man. He finally treated a squirrel, and we would all go on the weekends to my apartment. You know, somebody would cook, or we'd send out for pizza or something. We'd been drinking a little bit of wine. We're watching the American live comedy show that's on every weekend called Saturday Night Live, SNL. And it's been on for 50 years now, and given us many of our best American comics. And on this particular Saturday night, they did a real dark, progressive humor sketch called Head Wound Harry, starring the comedian Dana Carvey. And it was, you know, very dark and strange and full of Monty Python gore and blood spurting everywhere. And Wes Craven, with a couple of glasses of wine under his belt, started laughing like a 12-year-old boy that can't control himself. Now, Wes is like 6'4", and the other gentleman that was with us was Jack Coleman. You guys know who Jack is, right? Save the cheerleader, save the world. That's Jack Coleman. And Jack is about 6'4" also. And the two of them, with their long, skinny legs, slapping each other on the back and laughing at that sketch. And that was the moment when Wes Craven revealed to me that he was my friend finally, and my buddy, and not my boss, and just my director and my writer. And it was like a great moment and memory that I have of working with Wes. Wes had the first laptop I ever saw on a set, and Wes could change dialogue instantly while he was directing, because he's also a writer. And he had the sense of humor of a sort of 14-year-old boy in Arrested Development. You know, when Wes was a child, his parents were very religious and very conservative. I think he was allowed one Disney movie a year. And this is the old Disney, you know, Disney before there was cleavage on Little Mermaids. And so Wes had missed out, even though he was an incredible intellectual, and he was catching up on his reading and popular culture in college. He still had these great holes in his experience. We were always reminding him of some rock group that he hadn't listened to, or some movie that had slipped through his fingers growing up. And so he had this strange 14-year-old boy alive in him. And if you remember the jokes you cracked when you were 14, how bad they were, Wes still liked those jokes. And he would do these terrible puns on the set. In Nightmare 7, instead of snakes, which can be dangerous, they used eels. They had these eels from actually a wrangler who wrangles other animals in Hollywood movies. And I remember we were having lots of problems with the eels, and Russ was getting frustrated, and it was our most expensive nightmare movie to date, and he was just getting more and more frustrated and angry. And we have a rule in Hollywood with all of our unions, and that rule is that if you go overtime into the allotted point of time that you should begin lunch or dinner, there's a huge penalty, a huge fee that has to be paid on your paycheck, you know, because it means they're not managing the shoot right. And it's, you know, you get this penalty, you know, for you. So we call it a meal penalty. And Wes was very upset and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Damn it, if we don't get this shot, we're gonna be on eel penalty." And that's the kind of bad joke that Wes loved. You have to understand that with everything that he could do, between, you know, he reinvented horror several times. Nightmare on Elm Street, The Hills Have Eyes, Last House on the Left, and then he moved into, you know, the Scream movies. Then he got very meta, you know, with Nightmare on Elm Street 7. Of course, he did one of my favorites, which was the one that was shot in Haiti, Who Do That Voodoo Like You Do, you know, with Bill Pullman, that terrific film. But to see that sort of dichotomy in Wes of being this tall, elegant guy wearing Ralph Lauren clothes and very intellectual, telling jokes like a 14-year-old, bad puns, you know, eel penalty. Anyway, that's my Wes Craven story. Another question. Let's move to this side. Yeah, this, you stand up right here. Oh, here's the mic.
What's your favorite kill in the whole entire franchise?
My favorite kill? I like Tina. She's here somewhere. Amanda? I like Tina getting wiped on the ceiling. I think that's a classic scene in the history of cinema, actually. You know, right up there with Fred Astaire dancing up the walls. And I like the boy with the hearing aid who gets punished in Nightmare 6 by Freddy, because it's so politically incorrect. And Freddy is politically incorrect. And I think that it's a very honest kind of glee that Freddy has tormenting that character. And it shows us, you know, that Freddy can be an equal opportunity, you know, OSHA non-approved villain. So those are my two favorite ones. Another question on this side. Woman in the second row here.
Hiya. Obviously you're an amazing horror legend. Thank you for your service. Do you enjoy horror as a genre outside of work hours? And if so, what is your favourite horror movie that you didn't star in?
What was the last question, the last part?
What's your favourite horror movie that you didn't star in?
I'm a big fan of the 1974 low-budget Brian De Palma film Sisters, starring Margot Kidder, who was Lois Lane. There's a couple of sequences in that film that I think are genius. I think Margot Kidder's work as the Siamese twins is great. And one of my favorite underrated actors, William Findlay, his portrayal is possibly my favorite mad scientist. Now, I'm a big fan of Ernst Thesiger in Bride of Frankenstein, the OG Bride of Frankenstein too. But yeah, I do love that movie. It's got that great kind of strange comedy that it begins with too, dark comedy. It kind of gets you off balance. But yeah, that's a terrific little horror film. I mean, there's obviously it changes for me a lot all the time. I like 28 Days Later, and there's just so many films. Even recently, I'm a big fan of The Witch. I thought that was a terrific little film, and an unsettling film I just saw, and it's not horror, and it was up for an Oscar. It's not really horror, but you should all see it because it's kind of like waking up in the nightmare of a silent movie. Kinda, sorta. It's called The Girl with the Needle. And if you thought that the art direction and the look of Nosferatu was great, with Johnny Depp's daughter, you should check out The Girl with the Needle. Again, it's not horror, and you have to work with the subtitles because I think it's German or Polish, but it's just, when that film was over, I couldn't believe what they had accomplished. So that it's really a great creepy new movie to check out. Okay, somebody else. Wait. All right, Freddie.
What do you think of the 2010 remake?
I was going to ask that.
You guys, you have to understand something about the remake. I'm a huge fan of Rooney Mara, who took over the Heather Langenkamp role. And I think Jackie Earle Haley, who played Freddy, is a wonderful actor. Those of you that have seen the reboot of RoboCop, and those of you who've seen his work in Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp, he's great. I've been a fan of his since a movie he did called Breaking Away with Dennis Christopher, about the boys who wanted to be Italian bicycle racers, and they were in the class distinction in America between the working class kids in a college town and the snobby college kids. It addresses that caste distinction. He practically invented the kind of stoner kid character that we sort of associate with Sean Penn and Keanu Reeves. But Jackie did that character first in that film. So I love these actors, and I want to be supportive of it. I was told that they did a reshoot, which is the opening of the film, which is a successful opening, but what it did was, I think it threw the film out of balance a little bit, because you don't meet the kids and they're all happy-go-lucky. They're already tainted, by the power and the evil of Freddy. It's like they all have a little dark cloud following them around. And you sort of need that contrast, I think, to get your sympathy going, with the characters. And that would be my only, major criticism of the film. I think, unfortunately, they did that too soon. They should have waited a while, because we had just released Freddy versus Jason, had just come out on DVD, I think, at that point, and or 4K or 2K or something. And I think that the original Freddy films were still a little too fresh, because we keep getting established with new generations. I've been pimping and advertising for the 4K collection is coming out of Nightmare on Elm Street. And part of the reason is because so many of you were introduced to Nightmare on Elm Street on VHS, being passed around in college, a dog-eared copy. My dog ate the homework. My dog ate Nightmare on Elm Street 3. But, or at home with your parents, your mom and dad are watching Pretty Women, and you guys went to the mom and pop video store and got Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 or something, and watch mom and dad get scared, or dad ties knives to his fingers and scratches the window outside. But I've had so many fans share this family experience of watching the Nightmare films, not in a theater in the dark, but on the couch with that old Afghan blanket on the back of the couch, some cold pizza slices, some warm beer, you know, and the lights all turned down low, and Dad's doing the Freddie laugh in the hall. And so it became this sort of family experience, but you saw it on, excuse my French, that kind of shitty VHS quality, you know, on your old color TV, that old Sony, you know, with a cracked screen. And I recently had family of all different ages down at my place, and I bought the pizza, we had cocktails, some wine flowing, and I kept trying to think out, what shall I entertain them with? What show shall we watch? And I was just looking around, and I saw for like $3.99, it was unbelievably cheap, I downloaded the 4K of Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, starring Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly and Thelma Ritter and Raymond Burr, Perry Mason as the killer. It's unbelievable. It's extraordinary. You can look into, as the voyeur, into every apartment across the way from Jimmy Stewart's window, his rear window. You can look across and you can look into the apartments. You see the color of every single prop. You can see the color of the eyes of the people living there and their clothes. The deep focus is insane. That set, that was one of the greatest Hollywood sets. You can see the street in New York City behind the other side of the apartment building, with the cabs driving down, with people buying flowers, with a cop walking the beat. You know, it's an extraordinary thing. So I highly, if you have a favorite in the Nightmare franchise, I'm telling you, this 4K is great stuff.
Oh.
Familiar. Anyway, another question. Yes, the Freddyette back there. You two know each other?
Will you do another Freddy film?
Another what film?
Freddy, Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, you know what I kind of hope? I'm too old to play Freddy. I can't do the stunts over and over again. But I would love to be invited, if they remake Dream Warriors Part 3, I'd love to be invited to cameo as one of the doctors that's very skeptical and cynical and doesn't believe that these children could be having a collective nightmare. No such thing. Impossible. You know, I think that would be really fun and a great wink to all the fans, but also because that's such a tradition anyway in a remake, to have a cameo by an actor that was in the original. But that would be fun for me. I think, you know, the wonderful actress Priscilla Pointer, you know, her daughter was the great Amy Irving from Carrie and The Fury, among great productions she did on stage as well. I think she was even married to Steven Spielberg for a while. But her mother, Priscilla Pointer, was in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and portrayed one of those doctors. It would be kind of fun, you know, if we could just switch gender and I can play it, you know. It might be a nice wink to the audience. But I can't do Freddy anymore. Because I can't do stunts anymore, because you don't do them just once. You do them from every single angle. Now they got a drone, you know, they got a drone up here and a drone going up here, but I can't do them anymore. All right, another question. Gentleman with a mask.
Hello, Mr. Englund. Lovely to have you here. I really enjoyed 976 Evil, and I just wondered, do you have any unmade projects that you're up your sleeve that you would like to get made yourself?
Well, thank you for the compliment. 976 Evil, you know, I sound like a whiny Hollywood guy, but that's not my cut. They took my cut away. I had all these link shots that I had designed, and they took them all out because they were too artistic or something. But they linked the scenes, like you'd see someone smoking a cigarette up close. The camera would come in up close on my leading man, and the cherry on his cigarette would burn red at a certain position in the screen, and then that would dissolve to the brake light on a car. And you would move on to that next scene. That would be the linkage, and a lot of that was cut out. So I got a little, my nose got bent out of joint by that. However, I had a great dark Russian folktale. And at one point I had Lance Hendrickson promised, and a wonderful actress from Hollywood. I had Christopher Lee, a verbal promise. I had a promise from Donald Sutherland. And I'd scouted all the locations in Italy for a year. And there was a recession in Europe, and the recession took my financing away from Spain and Italy. That was a year of my life, but I believed in that project. It was about a fallen angel based on a Russian kind of dark folk tale, and a fallen angel who kind of becomes a kind of evil presence over a town, and I found this great hill town in Italy I was going to use. I think it might have been if I had my way, it would have been kind of like halfway between a dark, violent fairy tale and then that kind of classy horror like The Witch. That would have been my goal there. And it never got made, so that's a regret. And then the roles, I never know, I still remember, as us actors, there's something wrong with us. I still, have dreams about parts I didn't get in the 70s. You can't help it, and then parts, you wonder what would it have been like if I'd have been on Kojak. For a while, I was being looked at for that, or if I would have been on Dukes of Hazzard, who would I be now? I wouldn't have done, it's very strange that way. It was a great, huge movie, one of the biggest movies in Hollywood, starring Gene Hackman about the French Foreign Legion. And I remember going back and screen testing for that and wanting to work with Gene Hackman, God rest his soul, And then even more recently, great director was going to do a movie about the Crusades, which probably would have been a bad idea now that I think about it, Let's impose our religion on the Middle East. No, probably not a good idea, but it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I worked with in Stay Hungry, and I would have played sort of his Klaus Kinski, the guy that tends to a knight. I can't remember the word for the vassal or whatever that tends to a knight. And this would have been a knight of the Crusades. And that was 6 months in Spain. That would have been a great adventure. So as actors, as well as directors, we have those regrets. But because they always wanted me just to direct horror, I don't have a lot of regrets about films that I was involved with potentially directing that didn't happen, because most of what I wanted to direct were not in the genre. As much as I love the genre, I get a knot in my stomach directing genre, because there's effects and there's the science of effects and there's and how they can break your budget. And when you're directing, the moment the day starts, all you're thinking about is that clock ticking and money being spent. When you're an actor, you don't do that. You don't go there. And so I'm kind of relieved not to have kept straying in that direction. Although maybe I would direct something on stage. I don't know. I have a couple of projects that I've always entertained. A production of 12th Night. I have an idea for 12th Night. I have an idea for the old American classic, Our Town, to do it in kind of rehearsal clothes, with the props all sitting around on the stage on a table, and people sit in a chair, but then when their time to act comes, they go over and they grab a scarf and throw it around their neck, or an apron, and then they turn into the character that they're playing, And so I have a good concept for that, but I got to get somebody that's willing to finance it and let me do it my way or the highway. Okay, another question. Gentleman standing here in the brown jacket. Who you gonna call?
Sorry. I actually really liked Freddy vs. Jason, and obviously no disrespect because you did lose that final battle, and I was really sad. I think you did the stunts really well in that as well. I enjoyed watching you. Being in your early 50s, could you have not carried on by anything with another Freddy, or do you think that was it? It was dead?
Well, what I learned on that film was I could barely get out of bed on Monday morning, you know, like being a football player on Monday, you know. The adrenaline goes away after you win, and then you just, it's nothing left but aches and pains. You got to remember when you do stunts, if you're an actor, you do them over and over and over, and that's when you get hurt. You know, it sort of goes against the grain of good sense not to want to add or embellish or to change something a little bit after you've done it so many ways. And that's where you're off your mark and you can get hurt, you know. And I've done some fire stunts and they're quite magical. They used to they would baste you in this stuff called Australian water gel. And then they set you on fire. Now, if you're an actor and they've set my arm on fire, a stuntman counts. All the stuntman is doing is counting, because he knows they got to come in and put that out in 5 seconds or 15 seconds or however long that gel, that protective gel all over him works. But when you're an actor and you're full of ego and narcissism like we actors are, I know how goddamn cool that looks to have my arm on fire. And I'm not counting like I'm supposed to. I've stopped counting. I just know this looks great. And if I can get my flaming hand up by my head, that's gonna look so cool. And then it gets very hot. All of a sudden it gets very, very hot. And you realize what a fool, what a jerk I've been. I should have been counting. And you know, you would count after you've made mistakes like that over the years, and I have, or saying, yeah, I can do that. And I was in my 50s in Freddy vs. Jason, but I'm a surfer, and I could hold my breath underwater longer than the Navy SEALs, you know? And so I had to do all that water stuff. Now that's not me flying through the air on fire. That's a stuntman, but that's me underwater, and that's me coming out of the water and landing on the dock and all that, because I could do that stuff. And that's me jumping around on the set. And a lot of that fighting is me. There's a couple of kung fu kicks that aren't me, because I didn't want to do that. I remember arguing with Ronnie Chu about that, saying, Freddy fights dirty. Freddy's a junkyard dog. Freddy doesn't do kung fu unless he's mocking it or making fun of it. I said, if we can make fun of it, but that's the wrong thing to say to an Asian man about their martial arts, you know. Can I make fun of it? You know, chop sake, you know, and he wouldn't let me do that. So they doubled me on a couple of those high karate kicks. But yeah, it's just, you know, we all get old. I want to sit behind a desk now, you know, in a suit and tie, you know, and just be Mike Myers, you know, just be evil, like an evil Bond villain. All right. I don't know how much time we have. Another question? Let me see. Somebody in the middle. This gentleman here with the beard? Yeah. You? Yeah.
Hello, it's really nice to make your acquaintance. So Freddy he got me into horror. I've always been a fan. But have you ever fallen out of love with Freddy? Were there times when it was a grueling thing to have to play him?
Well, yeah, Freddy, I did, I remember, I think I did a television series with Mariska Hargitay from Special Victims Unit, Law and Order, and Blair Underwood, wonderful actor, recently in that crazy Nicolas Cage film where he plays the serial killer. I can't think of the name of it right now, but Blair is great in
Long
that.
Legs.
What?
Long Legs.
And I lost the question. The question again? Oh, when I get sick of Freddy. So yeah, after doing that series, I got called up to do another movie, and I think it was Nightmare 4, and I was dead meat, and I was a little slow moving, even though it's my favorite performance in all of the franchise in Part 4. It was hard for me to get cranking, and it was hard for me to face that makeup, and I had a lot of effect makeup in that film, and different effects as well. And I remember sitting out on remember the junkyard set with all the cars stacked high, and they come to life and their headlights go on. That's all real. That wasn't CGI. That wasn't special effects. That's real. And we were out in the a-hole of the San Fernando Valley outside of Hollywood, beyond Burbank and the studios. And it's weird out there. There's mountains out there and rolling hills, and you get this stuff called tule fog or tool fog, this ground fog, and it holds the cold in. And it was freezing cold, and we're out there, and I remember I had my little cup of soup, you know, my little hot cup of soup that they used to have that you could buy at Tesco, you know what I'm saying, those little soups. And I had a blanket around me, and it was like 4 in the morning, and I was going down. I was miserable. And it was the first time I'd ever seen video assist. And it was instant replay, and Rennie Harlan, the director, the great Rennie Harlan, had it on the set, and he saw me going down. And he got me up, and with my little cup of soup, I waddled up, and I sat in his chair in front of the video assist with the black cardboard around it, so you got a clear picture. And he showed me the rough cut of the junkyard sequence in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, and it was great. In black and white. In black and white, I'm looking at this. And I knew how good the film was going to be then. And I knew I had to suck it up and get out there. And I literally, just watching that, gave me my second wind. But that's the last time I'd ever, said, boy, Freddy's a pain in the ass. Because there came a point where the power, the financial freedom, and the fun of having a hit franchise all came together at the same time. And I really made peace with what to say on my tombstone, which is, rest in peace, Robert Englund, aka Freddy Krueger. I have to live with that, and I'm fine with that. I'm just fine with that. Another question? On the aisle here in the stripes.
Hi Robert, it's nice to see you. I think from Dream Warriors, sort of after Philip's death, you become like a Willy Wonka character where you kill people with what they love. Do you think that's the reason why you're so appealing to younger viewers?
No, I think you guys, it's really simple. I know they write papers about this in universities now, and people have all these theories and opinions, but it's real simple. Wes Craven came up with a great hook. And the hook is that this evil, two wrongs don't make a right, that this evil, that is Freddy, was kind of banished to some purgatory. Freddy's not in hell. He's on his way to hell. But because he was dealt with like he was dealt with by the parents, burned alive, he's on a revenge motif. His freedom is when somebody talks about him, that's a relative of the people that wronged him, even though he was a vile man. He has access to those relatives' subconscious, and he chooses to go after their youngest and most vulnerable. And I think that that's the hook, the idea that somebody could violate that privacy of my subconscious, enter my dream landscape, manipulate it, because Freddy knows what's in your diary. Freddy knows what you have hidden in your underwear drawer. You know, Freddy knows who you have a crush on. Freddy knows what you're afraid of. You know, and he can exploit that. And that's a very simple premise. And when you stick to that, and that's how he manifests in the subconscious, Freddy's not walking around in an alley in Soho, you know. He's not real. He's in the imagination. But in that place, he can do some serious damage. We want to wrap it? Okay, wrap it or one more question? We're wrapping. I'm sorry. They're pulling me off. I see the hook. The hook's coming out. Thank you all.
I love you.